In this video, I would like to talk about the various dwarven subraces of Karilan, my fantasy campaign setting. In D&D, people often complain about how many elven subraces there are, but I have never seen anyone complain about the dwarves, and there are probably as many of them as the elves. Some have a lot written about them and some have literally one line of text devoted to them. Personally, I am absolutely okay with this racial variety. I think that a race with such a long history is bound to have various different cultures and ethnicities. The dwarves originated somewhere in the Underdark, but emerged in the ancient times in two main points on the surface of the world, in northern Taeldo and western Undo. The mountain dwarves of Undo do not exist anymore. They were wiped off the face of the world by cataclysms and invaders. The dwarves of Taeldo formed a great nation of Gordalm that withstood multiple cataclysms, but in the end still fell apart with its population fleeing to other lands. The most common dwarves are hill dwarves. Nowadays they live predominantly in Kargan, but can also be encountered in other lands including the Underdark. Hill dwarves are known for their skill in warfare, their ability to withstand physical and magical punishment, their knowledge of the earth's secrets, their hard work, and their capacity for drinking ale. Dream dwarves claim to be able to commune with the earth itself to gain prophetic insight. They live in Kes, New Aventus and some other lands. Dream dwarves feel the hills slumber beneath them. They see the world as a resting giant of inestimable power, and they are caught in their dreaming. While other dwarves shape metal and stone, dream dwarves contemplate and meditate. Wise and cautious, they understand nature in a way at once similar to and wholly alien to the understanding of druids and shamans of other races. Dream dwarves share a sort of collective subconscious with the world around them, a phenomenon they call the Earth Dream. The Earth Dream shapes many aspects of the Dream Dwarf's lives, and no discussion of Dream Dwarfs can be complete without at least some understanding of the Earth Dream. The Earth Dream is a powerful force, and members of other races can occasionally feel its pull and become Earth Dreamers. Duergars, also known as Grey Dwarfs, follow Roknar, the dwarven deity of deceit and temptation. Gordalm fell due to these machinations, but the fall dealt significant damage to the Dwargars as well. Nowadays, most of them live in the underground realms beneath the Iron Theocracy, but there are numerous smaller communities in other parts of the Underdark. Those communities venerate Laduger and Deep Duerra in addition to Roknar. Duergars are known for their cruelty and bitterness. Like their surface-dwelling kin, Grey Dwarfs are famed for their smithwork and craftsmanship, but unlike their brethren in the realms above, the Duergar are grim and cheerless, leading lives of endless toil. 1 in 100 births brings forth a Duergar bestowed with alternative psionic gifts. When such children grow into their powers, they often become authoritarian members of their clans, known as Duergar tyrants. Deep dwarves live in the Middle Dark, and some even settle in the Lower Dark. These small communities very rarely contact the surface, usually relying on the deep halflings when trading. Deep dwarves speak Stat-Ond, the deep dwarves themselves call it Dwarven, the language of the long-gone mountain dwarves. This fact makes some sages believe that the deep dwarves are the survivors of the cataclysm that destroyed Stat-Ond. However, the deep dwarves do not know about Stat-Ond, do not remember it, and it is not mentioned in their historical records. Deep dwarves are the same height as other dwarves, but leaner. Their skin sometimes has a reddish tinge, and their large eyes lack the brightness of those of their kindred, being a washed-out blue. Their hair color ranges from bright red to straw blonde. Earth dwarves live in the halls of ice, deep in the lower dark. They speak Terran. Earth dwarves are insightful and thoughtful. They believe in self-reliance and in benefiting from their own efforts. Earth dwarves have brown skin and hair that ranges from white to yellow. Some ancient clans of dwarves of Stat-Ond settled not in the mountain dells favored by most of their race, but in the tall, impregnable cliffs that overlook the sea of northern Aril, where now the nation of Gessalion is located. These sea cliff dwarves are considered by other dwarves to be saltbeards, though in truth most of them preferred the safety and security of their subterranean homes as much as any other dwarf. The difference is that those rare few among them, who would be saltbeards, don't have far to go. All sea cliff dwarfs are good swimmers, as behooves folk whose lower passages can fill with sea water during major storms. Living areas and the like are always situated well above even the highest such waterline. Because of their skill with stone and engineering, desert dwarfs of Okator and Vrizea are acknowledged masters of locating water and digging wells. The importance of water to desert peoples gives the dwarfs both great wealth and great political power. Desert dwarfs speak 7 dwarven. Their skin is dark bronze in color, darker than that of dream dwarfs, and their black hair usually is short. Beards typically are short or even non-existent. Most other dwarfs consider this almost heretical. They wear loose clothing and elaborate turbans. The turban's decoration shows the dwarf's status. Badlands dwarfs have made their homes in the Badlands of Urodor, where they dig for an entirely different type of treasure – water. Because badlands are usually formed by water erosion, deposits of water sometimes form deep below the surface in quantities that can sustain a settlement for years. In some rare cases, badlands dwarfs tap into subterranean rivers, making their communities attractive stops for merchants, caravans, and nomad tribes alike. Badlands dwarfs have a fairer complexion than the desert dwarfs. They do not wear decorated turbans, preferring more practical headwear that does not force them to make tunnel ceilings higher. They are also thinner and less tolerant of poison and alcohol. Dune dwarfs of Dunlom prefer to live on the surface, unlike most other dwarfs. They are much less stubborn than the other dwarfs, as they always have to interact with people from various other cultures. With a penchant for trading, they have gained a reputation of expert merchants and hagglers. Their skin color ranges from tan to almost black, but their hair is always brown. Fireblood dwarfs used to be part of the Fireblood clan that migrated to Zotha from Dunlom. Particularly fond of using dormant volcanoes as the entrances to their homes, these dwarfs followed volcanic trails and tunnels in search of greater access to the world's depths. Unfortunately, this led to a horrific encounter with a nest of red dragons. Outraged at the intrusion, the greedy dragons enslaved the entire clan of dwarfs. Instead of mining gold and gems for the love of beauty and creation, the dwarfs now labored for the dragons. Over time, the dwarfs of the Fireblood clan began to take on certain aspects that differentiate them from others of their kind. No one knows if this was due to interbreeding with dragons, natural mutation, or a magical effect. Stonefire dwarfs of Eratarra live close to psionically enriched magma. This proximity made them frailer, but imbued them with minor pyrokinetic abilities. Stonefire dwarfs have fair skin and grey or black eyes. They prefer clothing in yellow or brown colors. Arctic dwarfs of Arenem do not mine. Their main method of subsistence are fishing and whaling. Mining, woodcutting, and construction work is done by Arctic goblin slaves. Other dwarfs look down upon the Arctic dwarfs, believing their practice of slavery to be undwarfly and crude. Arenemians are not known for their smiths and architects, but are known for their mystics. These divine spellcasters do not worship deities, but devote themselves fully to narrow concepts such as ice, weather, air, water, etc. The Arctic dwarves do not worship the dwarven pantheon, preferring this kind of mysticism. Arctic dwarves have a fair complexion and dark, straight hair. Arctic dwarves that live in the northern reaches are more similar to the hill dwarves, living underground and known for their metalwork. Jungle dwarves of Darnia value their family, even more so than the other dwarves. Despite that, they are open to invite people of other races to be their honorary family members, should they prove loyal enough. It is a relatively common thing to see a jungle dwarf refer to a Satran as a brother. The jungle dwarves are thought to be related to the forge-born dwarves, who fled the collapsing giant nation of Skadana to live like barbarians, losing their dwarven roots. Because of their height, jungle dwarves can duck under vegetation that impedes humans, yet they are stockier than gnomes or halflings, and able to bull through what they can't avoid. Hardy to a fault, jungle dwarves are explorers, pathfinders, and traveling merchants. They look like hill dwarves, but usually have a more unkempt appearance and hide-sewn clothing. The forge-born dwarves of Amost Kadol remember well the wrongs done to them in ancient times. In scrolls and stories they recall the exploitation they endured under their eldritch giant masters, and the betrayal done to them by their maker Moradin. Having broken their chains during an invasion from the Serpent Realms 1,000 years ago, they look back on their flight with both pride and regret. They are proud of their legacy, having killed many giants in their flight, but they lament those dwarves they left behind. That many survivors from those dark days live on as jungle dwarves in Darnia fill the Forgeborn with dreadful shame. The Forgeborn dwarves see it as their purpose to cleanse the stains from their people's history and to repair their record through their achievements. Unlike common dwarves, the Forgeborn have little use for the gods, especially for Moradin. They blame the Forge Father for the horrors visited upon them at the world's dawn. Rather than bow and scrape to an unworthy deity, they look to their ancestors for guidance by calling them forth with potent rituals to gain their advice and encouragement, and to dispel their doubts and renew their commitment to righting the wrong done to them as a people. Many Forgeborn dwarves travel to other dwarven nations, particularly Darnia, to help their people and try to dissuade them from worshipping any deities. Some try to civilize their jungle dwarves, but these attempts almost never succeed, once again reinforcing the shame of losing their dwarven brothers. Although many of the northern and southern reaches dwarves are the same as dwarves in other lands, some have left their ancestral homes in the mountains seeking an altogether different material from which to forge their weapons and armor. This material, known as blue ice, is found only in the deepest and most ancient glaciers. Blue ice can be forged like metal, but is lighter and keeps a sharper edge. These dwarves have taken to building their underground homes in the hearts of glaciers that carry deposits of blue ice. These glacial mines are similar in many ways to the mountain mines, except that everything is crafted from masterfully carved ice. The dwarves who dwell in these fantastic structures are often known as glacier dwarves. Aleithian dwarves are a deep-dwelling race of psionic dwarves. They live far underground as deep dwarves do, but they have isolated themselves even further at the behest of Aleithilithos, one of the Thanes of Sardior. Sardior's influence through the Thane has changed the physiology of the Aleithian dwarves. Aleithians are similar in height to regular dwarves and weigh the same, even though they have a leaner build. Their skin tone is pale grey with a purple hue, and their eyes are usually steel grey. Their hair color ranges from purplish black to white, and they favor elaborate mustaches with moderate beards. Their dress is functional and blends in with the normal environment. As a race, Aleithians have a deep joy when working with gems and crystal. They value items made with gems more so than typical dwarves. This is apparent in their architecture and their minds. Wild dwarves are the primitive inhabitants of the jungles of Taeldo and the Savage Lands. They have largely rejected the clan-based, craft and smith-oriented culture of their dwarven cousins, choosing instead to live in hunting bands with ever-shifting memberships. Eschewing all trappings of civilization, wild dwarves live like beasts, engaged in an endless hunt for survival. Only those who dare the shadowy depths of Karilan eastern jungles are even aware of the existence of this barbaric dwarven subrace, for these elusive hunters keep to the depths of their woodland homes. Wild dwarves are dark-skinned, short and stout, with dark brown eyes. Their heavily tattooed bodies are covered with grease to ward off insects and make them hard to hold. Wild dwarves wear little except for their long, woven hair, which serves as adequate clothing. They plaster their hair and skin with mud to form a crude armor when going to war. Wild dwarves have more in common with the beasts of the jungle than they do with their dwarven kin, viewing life as an endless hunt and each day as a struggle to kill or be killed. Wild dwarves distrust all intruders into their jungle domain and, if confronted, are apt to attack first without question. Much like the beasts they strive to emulate, wild dwarves care little about going-ons in the world at large, the doings of those who are not wild dwarves, or material possessions. The Utuchekulu are thought to be related to the wild dwarves of the Savage Lands. These ebony-skinned dwarves have black hair, dark eyes and a single blood-red fang protruding from one side of their mouth. Sundered from their kin since primeval times, the Utuchekulu mixed with something foul and unnatural, while evolving separately in the jungle. Today they are an evil, man-eating people. Utuchekulu live in tribal bands, usually ruled by the strongest warrior. While clerics are respected advisors, they never hold leadership positions. They prefer to occupy abandoned stone ruins and rebuild them. Every clan has 2 or 3 smiths to make tools and weapons of steel. The Utuchekulu survive mainly by hunting game and humans. Women and children forage for small game, eggs, grubs and fish. Utuchekulu are zealous man-eaters and hunt humans as game. An Utuchekulu is about 3 feet tall and weighs 55 to 70 pounds. Utuchekulu have thin and scanty beards, often shaved. Korobokurus are dwarf-like humanoids that live in barren wilderness areas where they seldom come into contact with humans. They live in simple villages, tending small farms in secluded areas. They typically avoid any contact or involvement in the affairs of the world outside their farms, but occasional individuals, driven by wanderlust or inspired by some contact with human civilization, find their way into human lands. Humans look down on Korobokurus in more ways than one, and stereotype them as being rude, belligerent, boastful, and somewhat comical. Korobokurus resent this reputation, but generally do little to disprove it. That aside, they have simple tastes, enjoying community life in their small villages, telling wildly fanciful stories around the fire, simple arts, and collecting treasure. They consider it poor taste to display their wealth and usually carry only a few coins on their person. Millennia ago, the frost giants of the ice waste of the abyss enslaved a tribe of Duergar and brought them to their home to craft armor and weapons. All but the hardiest perished, and those who survived gradually changed, becoming more like the frost giant masters. Now frost dwarfs toil away in the mines and forges of the ice wastes, plotting their liberation and their revenge. Frost dwarfs have a pale blue skin and hollow eyes that glow with a strange white light. Their white hair is covered in icicles. Wind throwers are a race of brutal, psionic dwarfs, layering beneath hills, mountains and deserts. They get their names from the ability to create powerful blasts of wind from their supernaturally strong right arms. A wind thrower is 4 feet tall and weighs about as much as an adult human. Hair coloration ranges from red to white, but skin color is always blue. Wind throwers are thought to be related to the hill dwarfs, as they speak Gordalm, and live in the upper dark below northern Mishtafalon, Aventan and northern parts of Taeldo. They despise all other dwarves, including the Dwergars. Beneath the waves, aquatic dwarves remain the masters of stone. They build massive, elaborate fortresses near the meadow-rich waters that surround undersea thermal vents. Unlike their land-bound relatives, the aquatic dwarves are less stubborn and more tolerant of others. An aquatic dwarf is slightly taller and thinner than a hill dwarf. Her feet and hands are webbed to facilitate swimming. An aquatic dwarf's skin ranges from pale green to dark blue. Her hair usually matches her skin color, but may be 1 or 2 shades darker. The dark dwarves of Tanderel are descendants of the deep dwarves who have gone to the upper dark and eventually returned to the surface in southern Mishtafalon. The dark dwarves did not get their name from any evil acts, but from their shift in their religious ideology. They believe that Moradin is preventing the dwarves from progressing, forcing them to abide by ancient traditions. Instead, they began worshipping Dugmarin Brightmantle, the dwarven god of invention and discovery, as their primary deity. This fact causes more arguing in the dwarven pantheon than the existence of the Duergar. The Dark Dwarfs did not abolish all the traditions, retaining the clan structure, but they did become more open to changes. They focused on research and invention, designing such things as firearms, cannons, and even pedal-powered and clockwork vehicles. It was the Dark Dwarfs who discovered the Shatter Sand formula and shared their knowledge with other dwarfs. The Dark Dwarfs value creativity, scholarship, and inventiveness, but they only share their inventions with those they trust, mostly only other dwarfs. Dark dwarfs have fair, sometimes pale skin, black or dark brown hair, and red eyes. Midgard dwarfs are a powerful, semi-mythical race, capable of forging priceless magical treasures and even artifacts. Their magical ability is limited to crafting items, but they are also skilled warriors, capable of defeating giants and heroes alike. Unlike most other dwarves, they are relatively solitary, living in small groups of no more than 30 individuals in remote hills of northern Mishtafalon. Midgard dwarves stand about 3.5 feet high, with large heads and big hands. Their shoulders are broad and their arms stout, the result of wielding hammers and tongs over anvils and fires for decades. They craft masterwork items almost as a matter of course. In winter, they work tirelessly in homes below the earth. In summer, they farm the surface or travel to trade their gold, silver, and steel for food and cloth for humans, trolls, elves, and others. Midgard dwarves are extremely suspicious and skeptical of the Norse deities, none of whom are worshipped on Karilan anyway, and indeed of deities and priests in general. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.